all of them recorded. I haven't messed them up yet. I think. Now, or can I delete this stuff off of it? All right, we'll see what happens. So, 1 Samuel chapter 18. We have, this morning, went through looking at David's life, talking about a man after God's own heart, talking about how he was handling the situations he was put into as a very, very young man. Here, we're going to see a few more things. There's going to be a shift, right? So everything up to this point, there's been kind of a positive sway towards David with Saul, but at this moment, things start to go south. And from this point on, things are really go south from Saul's perspective. But I think it's important that we remember that the Bible is explicit about David caring for Saul, and the thing is he keeps that all the way throughout. So that's an important part of this. So in Samuel, 1 Samuel chapter 18, looking at verse 5, this is important because David and Jonathan form a bond at the first part of the chapter. That's what happens here. And Saul takes David and doesn't let him go home. So David actually never goes back to give a report to his dad about how his brothers are doing. Saul sends someone instead to talk to his father to say, I'm keeping your son. He's killed Goliath. He plays a part. We're going to keep him around here. I like him. At least initially. Literally for 4 verses. So, Jonathan and David become like blood brothers, if you will, in a way. And there's a covenant that's made between the two of them because they care for each other. And then we come down to verse 5. And this is important because this is going to be kind of indicative of David's life in the way that he moves about going forward. It says, and David went out whithersoever Saul sent him, and behaved himself wisely. And Saul set him over the men of war. He was accepted in the sight of all the people, and also in the sight of Saul's servants. So just as Saul had promised there would be a reward for killing Goliath, that reward is kind of given to David in terms of service in the military, and in a position of power. And the interesting part about David is that he has now been given a great amount of power, and he's been given a great amount of respect, but he behaves himself wisely. So once again, going back to the way David functions, even though, because it's the hard part, right? There are times where they talk about power, right? Power corrupts. It's always the statement. And absolute power corrupts absolutely. The idea here is that we'll see David takes that power and yet still remains humble. He remains humble and he behaves himself wisely, so that when he is interacting with people on a daily basis, he is behaving himself in a way that would be becoming of a man of God, if you will. And that's important because it kind of leads to the contention that is coming here in verse 6. It's basically the short form version of it, because I'm going to skip down to verse 10. Saul hears some ladies singing about David in the streets, and they're saying that Saul has slain thousands, and David hath slain 10,000s. Now, David has killed exactly one person in total, and the thing is Saul hears this, and instead of going, it's the times have changed, or wow, this is just something that happened, he gets upset and jealous. Why? Saul knows the kingdom is being taken from him. Doesn't know by who, hasn't exactly been told. No one's talked about David as far as we're aware. He knows it's being taken from him, and he immediately becomes jealous of David. And remains that way. So it says Saul was very wroth, and the saying displeased him. And he said, and you can even see it's illogical, he says, they have ascribed unto David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed but thousands. And what can he have more but the kingdom? He says, well, he's taken everything I've got. Saul's a bit of a drama queen, if you will, at this moment. He says, I've got nothing. This David has taken everything I have. And the only thing he hasn't taken is the kingdom. What does he want more? And so it says he eyes him from that day forward. But, notice this. We're going to read a couple verses, and we'll go back to Saul again. It says, it came to pass on the morrow that the evil spirit from God came upon Saul, and he prophesied in the midst of the house. And David played with his hand, as at other times. And there was a javelin in Saul's hand. And Saul cast the javelin, for he said, I will smite David even to the wall with it. And David avoided out of his presence twice. There's a bit of mercy here, I think, in that David lets him throw a javelin at him once, and still came back to play for him when he needed him. And then he got thrown a javelin at him again. And this is going to be shocking. And that's not the only time. It's going to happen again later too. That's a lot of service. And I don't know that I would have someone that hates me more than to throw a spear at me.
That's what I call a hostile work environment.
That is a hostile. You need to go to HR. You need to go to HR over that real quick. And the thing is that David cares about Saul. And so in this, we see what I think is very indicative of a way that God's love functions in us. How many times have people, we might lash out at God. I had a friend of mine tell me once, he said, I got angry with God once and I said some things. He said, am I doomed? Am I going to hell? I said, no, I don't think so, given some parameters we talked about. There's a lot of important things in there, but I said the important part is that there's repentance. You understand where you messed up, and we turn back to God. That's why God has a lot of forgiveness for us. And so in this case, we see Saul is literally trying to kill David on 2 occasions. But David loves Saul. David cares about Saul. And so he comes back to help him again. And like I said, it happens twice here. It's going to happen again later. But notice this is the response of Saul. It says, Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with him and was departed from Saul. So Saul removes him and makes him captain over 1,000. And so he takes him out of the palace so that he doesn't have to see him. And David now is amongst the people. So he went out and came in before the people. And David behaved himself wisely in all his ways, and the Lord was with him. Wherefore, when Saul saw that he behaved himself very wisely, he was afraid of him. But all of Israel and Judah loved David because he went out and came in before them. So the thing is David, because you've got to kind of think about what's happened here and give consideration to what could happen but doesn't, right? David just won a huge, major battle for Israel. He's a hero, right? I mean, everyone knows what's happened. They're singing songs about him in the streets. What happens when he goes out amongst the people? He behaves himself wisely. He doesn't soak in the praise. He doesn't bring the pride to himself. He doesn't make himself a celebrity. He behaves himself wisely. He behaves himself in a manner that is, one, the people still like him, but also that is what I would argue humble. Or there's a humility to who he is. He's not trying to, because this is the thing, David has been promised the kingdom. He's already been promised that he'll be king. But he's not using this as a political maneuver to push Saul out of the ball. He could. He could be trying to lead a coup against Saul. Saul tried to kill him. He has every right to. Right? He tried to kill me. And God's already promised that I'm going to be in the kingship. I'm going to take out Saul. But he doesn't. He chooses to love his enemy, Saul. He chooses to love a man who is, in this case, hurting him or attempting to hurt him. And he's behaving himself wisely among all people. So I think the part about why David is constantly described as a man after God's own heart is that he will have problems. There are sins that come in his life. But what we're seeing here is that he doesn't try to bring the attention to him. He didn't try to bring the win of that victory to him. He always is pushing towards God and trying to be humble before anyone he comes into contact with. And that's an impressive thing, I think, for us as Christians to kind of do in our own life. Because here's the thing, like I think about Saul intentionally throwing javelins at David. And I've been in a workplace where I was actually, I've got a friend of mine who actually was going through this recently. We worked in a place where people trying to get fired. They know. HR figured it out, found out the whole thing. And there was a coordinated effort. That's fun. What do? Well, it's real easy to be bitter about it. Real easy to be angry. Real easy to want to lash out. What would David do? He'd love them more. Doesn't mean he'd let them get away with things. He didn't let them throw the javelin at him. He moved out of the way. But he still cared for him. I think about situations where we're trying to, maybe God lays someone on our heart. We're talking to them about Christ. They lash out at us. Maybe we're trying to show them some love. They lash out at us. I know what I want to do in those situations. And this is where I'm praying for God's help and mercy. My immediate reaction is I want to stop. But maybe there needs to be another try. Maybe there needs to be a few tries. Maybe I got to get some javelins thrown at me in order to take care of what God would have me to do. Now, obviously, there's prayer about that. I believe David was praying about things here. But I do think that there's a part to this that shows God's love to care about a man who very clearly did not care about David. And people noticed and knew. And as you see that he builds a reputation for himself very quickly amongst the people, not just because he's going out before them and acting wisely, but because of his relationship with Saul. So we come down to the next part here, and this is so interesting to me because David has done so much already in terms of with the fight with Goliath. He's got the fame, and some time has passed, clearly enough so that he has earned the respect of people around him. Saul has to think of, he realizes, I am not going to be able to kill him. I'm over 2. So what do I do here? Here in verse 17, he starts to scheme. He says, behold, my elder daughter, Merab, her will I give thee to wife. Only be thou valiant for me and fight the Lord's battles. For Saul said, let not my hand be upon him, but let the hand of the Philistines be upon him. He says, what I'm going to do, I put David over the army. I'm going to put him in the front. I'm going to put him out in the battlefield. And that's how it is. That's going to happen again in the future. He said, I'm going to put him out on the battlefield. I'll let the Philistines kill him. And so David looks at him because he said, Saul has put forth a very big proposition. He's offering him his oldest daughter. He'd be married into the home. That's a pretty big deal. David says to Saul, who am I? And what is my life or my father's family in Israel that I should be son-in-law to the king? He says, I ain't worthy of that. I'm not. That doesn't mean he doesn't serve him faithfully. He says, I'm not worthy of that, Saul. And in fact, Saul doesn't give him Merab. He doesn't give him Merab, but he gives it to some other guy. And then there's the Maholathite. Wouldn't that be a place you want to be telling people he's from? That's a mouthful and a half there. But Adriel, the Maholathite, is the one who gets Merab, even though he's promised her to David. What does David do? He gets mad and throws his hands up and says, you can fight your own battles. No. He keeps on going. So now Saul's tried to kill him twice. He's thrown him on the front lines of battle. And now he promised him something and took it away from him. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. That'd make me angry very quickly. I don't like that. I've had a number of times where things get promised and then don't come to fruition. And that frustrates me. Oh, it makes me mad. Because if you're going to promise me something, you keep your word. And if you don't weren't going to give it to me, that's fine. I don't care. I'm not asking for things. But if you're going to promise me something, and specifically I'm thinking about work, don't tell me about it. If you ain't going to give me a promotion, don't give me a promotion. Or if you ain't going to give me a change of scenery, don't give me a change of scenery. It's fine. I can stay in the same basement office my whole life, I guess. But if you're going to tell me I'm going to change and give me the high rise, it'd be nice to be able to go into the high rise. I've never had a high rise apartment. But anyway, so I digress. Here we see Saul then gets a secondary scheme. Philistines didn't kill him in battle. Well, let's try something else. So he finds out that his daughter, and I'm going to say Michael, but it's not Michael, I think it's Michal or something like that along those lines, but I'm going to say Michael for my easiness of pronouncing it. His daughter loves David. She's falling for the man. She likes those handsome men. She don't like them battle-scarred men. And so when Saul hears about it, he's like, I like that. Sounds good to me. So he says, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make sure David dies this time. I'll get him this time. So what I'm going to do is tell my servants, hey, listen, you go tell David that you heard me talking and that my daughter likes him, but that I know he can't pay dowry for her. Right? Because David's he's poor. He ain't got no money. And he's king. What are you going to give a king? He says, so you tell him, I don't want a dowry. You tell him I want 100 foreskins of Philistines. Ain't that the gift you want to have? Woo. All right, he says, I want 100 of them. You tell him, give me 100, and I'll give you my daughter. So the servants go in. Hey, David, let me tell you what we heard about from Saul. He says that he's willing to give you his daughter. And David says, notice this, down here in the part, it says, and David said, seemeth it to you a light thing, notice, to be a king's son-in-law, seeing that I'm a poor man and lightly esteemed. See, David doesn't even realize where he's at in terms of the people, and the respect that he has in terms of power. And he says, I'm not worthy of it. Why would you tell me this? But see, notice this, it says, the servants of Saul told him, go to Saul and say, this is what David told us. He said he ain't worthy of it. So Saul says, you go tell him, he doesn't want any money, he just wants some foreskins, because he wants to be avenged. But the whole reason he wants it is because he wants David to die. Mm-hmm. He's like, if I send him in there, he'll die. Well, David hears it and goes, all right, cool, I can do that. Mm-hmm. So he goes to battle. And he doesn't bring him 100. Boy, how do you give him a double blessing? 200. Woo! 200 foreskins, ah boy. And so, it says, and David arose and went, and he and his men slew the Philistines 200 men. David brought their foreskins, and they gave them in full tale to the king, that he might be the king's son-in-law. And this time Saul keeps his word. Though, I want to harken back a little bit. There's a phrase that Saul uses that I think is unintentionally prophetic to what happens. Notice in verse 21, I skipped over attention. And Saul said, I will give him her, that she may be a snare to him. Now, of course, he's referring to the Philistines, because he's intended for that. She's going to be important later. Really important. To David as a person. And I think it's important to note that Saul in this moment unintentionally tells the truth for the future without meaning to. We'll get there, I think, because that's going to be an important part of David as a person, because actually the scene that causes all this problem is one of the things I think really puts David close to God. So here we have, he's son-in-law of the king now. He's got him a wife, he's commander of armies, things are going pretty good for old David. Other than the fact he had a javelin thrown at him and he's been put into battle a few times with the hope he's going to die. I mean, you know, you win some, you lose some. So we come to chapter 19. Now, Saul talks to Jonathan and to his servants and says, we're going to kill him. We're going to kill David. Jonathan's like, no, we're not. Because he likes David. He's my bud. And so the thing is, there's going to be a constant fight between them. But David has endeared himself to the people. He's endeared himself to Jonathan. He's endeared himself to people. Why? Because he's not a person who is angry or cruel or rude. And in these cases, he's being wise about how he acts with the people he has. So when we come down to verse 5, 4 and 5, look at how Jonathan talks to his dad about David. And Jonathan is standing up to the king. That's grounds for death. So this is him risking his life in a way, even if he is the son of the king. Back-talking the king and telling him no is not usually a great way of moving forward in your life. Verse 4, and Jonathan spake good of David unto Saul his father, and said unto him, let not the king sin against his servant, against David, because, note, he hath not sinned against thee, and because his works have been to thee-ward very good. He's not done anything to you. Now, remember, because this is the thing, I really think this is important when looking at David. Saul has literally tried to kill him. He's lied to him. He's tried to kill him. He's put him in dangerous situations with the intention of killing him. David's not stupid. He knows what's happening. But he has not retaliated against Saul. Why? Because he cares about him. He loves him. There's a part here that says David, and that's why I would say, once again, I don't know that well, I can tell you, this epitaph ain't gonna be on my theme, my tombstone anytime soon, but I'd like to work towards it. I'd like to get to the point where I, in my life, one, behave myself wisely amongst people, and two, that when there is somebody who has doubt for me, I don't pray for their bad, I pray for their good. I don't seek to do them harm, I seek to do them good. And I don't seek to do them harm just because I know it'll make them mad, because that's what the Bible says, like if you'll do good to them, it'll heap coals of fire upon their head. That's not the reason to do the good. To do the good is to do the good for the goodness sake, right? Show Christ's love to them. But, see, I know that verse, because boy, how did young Lucas memorize that one? Because I was like, aha, heaps of cold fire. Yeah, that's what I like. That's not good. See, I'm not a David person. David says, I'm going to treat him this way because I love him. I care about him, and I'm going to show him mercy and grace against all odds. So much so that Jonathan has noticed it. It says, and he put his life in his hand and slew the Philistine, and the Lord wrought a great salvation for all Israel. Thou sawest it, and didst rejoice. Wherefore then wilt thou sin against innocent blood, to slay David without a cause? And he's called innocent before Saul. And then, of course, Saul says, I won't kill him then. All right, fine. Now, I don't know if you noticed the moniker at the top of the title says Saul tries to kill David. That's what mine says. He says, I won't kill him. Well, sometimes things last, sometimes they don't. Coming down to verse 9. There's war. So in verse 8, there's war. David goes out. He fights Philistines. Guess what? He wins. He does really good. They run away from him. So when he comes back, it says the evil spirit from the Lord was upon Saul, as he sat in the house with his javelin in his hand. I don't know why these people let him keep javelin. Like at this point, that's the part where I'm thinking is like someone here, the javelin keeper's not doing his job. And he should have been like keeping that thing away from Saul. Saul's sitting around. He's got a javelin in his hand. And where's David? Sitting right there playing for him again. He's already threw the spear at him twice. At some point I have to question whether this is a logical decision for David. But here he is. Yet again, Saul's sitting in his chair. He's got a javelin in his hand. David's playing his little lyre. I went to bring mine with me. I brought it with me. I'll show you what it looks like. I have a little Davidic harp. Now, here's the thing. So what happens, verse 10? And Saul sought to smite David even to the wall. Now he just told him he wasn't going to kill him. It didn't last very long. So he throws it at him again, and he smote the javelin into the wall. David fled and escaped that night. 3 times. Saul's over 3. But he came back twice. You know, I genuinely, I think about the fact that in our lives, sin against God is the worst thing we could do. Even a little one, right? It's the worst because it separates us from Him. It hurts Him. And He doesn't want that. That's why He sent His Son to die for us. At some point you'd think He'd walk away. I've thought about this a lot actually. Especially when I was kind of going through what forgiveness was and trying to figure that out. God has no obligation to forgive us. He don't. He doesn't have to. And yet He says, if you'll, come to Me and repent, I'll forgive you. All of it. Big sins, little sins. And so the thing is and there is no big or little sin, but I'll say it that way just for the colloquialism. Here we see David forgiving Saul over and over again for throwing a javelin at him on the wall. It's a reflection. I genuinely think it's a reflection of God's love in a situation that, to me, I would have given up on Saul a long, long time before, especially if I'd known God had picked me big camp.
We got those, I guess it's called a model. And it's like the first time, shame on me, second time, shame on you, there won't be a third. Mm-hmm. That's what this puts me in the mind of.
Right. Doesn't it though? It's odd, right? And honestly, I think about David. Like David, because here's the thing, there's not another playing the lyre, throw a javelin at you again per se. There's some more situations that are relatively similar. But here's the thing, David keeps coming back because he cares for Saul. Like, and it's not like a weird thing. It's that he has a heart for him, and it's one of the, we won't get there now. But one of my favorite parts, it's where we'll stop right now, is when he talks to him after cutting off a piece of his garment. It's how he refers to Saul. We'll get there though, so bear with me. We're gonna make it. So here we see him throw the spear again, and now here's the other thing. This is I want to throw this in here as a little bit of foreshadowing. He goes home. David runs home to his wife, who is the daughter of Saul. Right now, she lets him out the window, and he runs and escapes. And she puts some pillows in the bed to make it look like he's asleep with some goat's hair. And covers with a cloth, and then when Saul sends his messenger, she's like, "Oh, he's sick. He's in the bed. He's sick. I can't. He's sick in there." So they come in to rough him up and take him to the throne to kill him. And well, it's just a pillow. So Saul gets mad, and he's like, "Why would you?" Because this is the thing, man. This is important. Why would you do this to me? Right? His exact words are, "Why hast thou deceived me so, and sent away mine enemy, that he has escaped?" Comparison, contrast. What does Michael do? Michelle. He said unto me, "Let me go. Why should I kill thee?" She lies on him. He threatened to kill me. Isn't that weird? Here David is showing great mercy to her dad in a number of ways, has shown zero retaliation, has done nothing to him. And the first time she gets a little bit in trouble, and she ain't even that big in trouble, Dad's just yelling at her, she goes, "Well, he threatened to kill me." His wife, who loved him. It's interesting, isn't it? There's a difference between the love that David is showing and the love that his wife, in this case, is showing. So anyway, he runs away. There's a whole bunch of situations that he goes to go hide. He ends up with Samuel, and there's this really odd situation. Or it's not odd. It's funny in a really strange way. Every time Saul sends people to go get him, they end up prophesying, like they're around the prophets. So all of them start prophesying, forget what they're there for, and like don't do it. So they don't come get him. So Saul gets mad, and it's like, well, if they're not going to get him, I'm going to go down there. So Saul goes down there, ends up prophesying, and for some reason takes off all of his clothes and lays down naked all day and all night. So God literally prostrates this man. And I really genuinely believe that's the judgment of God putting him in his place, saying, "You're in the wrong spot. You came here in the wrong place. Let me show you who you are." It's that old naked you came into the world, and naked you'll go out. Yeah. And I'll lay you down on the ground to make sure you know. And then people were like, "Hey, hold on, is Saul a prophet?" Like it happened in such a way people notice. They're like, "Man, look at him. He's laying down naked. He must be a prophet." I don't know. People are really. This is like the most quintessential group of random people in public I've ever seen. But so what happens is, I think here we see God protecting David, but David's not there to insult Saul. He doesn't mock him. He doesn't treat him poorly. None of that happens. And I'll skip a little bit ahead. There's the whole thing with Jonathan talking to David. There's going to be the arrows. You know the story about the arrows. And he shoots them out into the field and says, go further. And then they cry and they hug. And it's a really sad situation because Saul threatened to kill him. So then in chapter 21, we see that David has the opposite. David goes to a priest, which is really unfortunate for the priest in the long run. And he says, "Hey, I have nothing to feed myself or my men." And the priest says, "Well, all I've got is the shewbread, which is reserved for the priests." But he says, "But if you've kept yourself clean, then we'll let you have some," which was a big deal. And David says, "Oh, don't worry. We've been on the run. We're as clean as you can get because we can't do anything except for be clean," specifically for women. That's why he says that you can't have been around women. And so he gives him the bread and he eats there. And then he runs away. There's some other things that happen with him acting like a madman. I don't really know that is reflective of his heart of God, so we're going to skip over because I'm not really sure that helps out any. But he does pretend to be crazy. Dave's got a really interesting life. So chapter 22. This is interesting to me, and I like it a lot. David therefore departed thence and escaped to the cave Adullam. And when his brethren and all his father's house heard it, they went down thither to him. Everybody comes down to visit. They find out where he's at, because he's been running from the king. Everybody knows he's a fugitive. So here he is, he's in this cave. So his family comes to see him. And some other people do too. And everyone that was in distress, and everyone that was in debt, and everyone that was discontented, gathered themselves unto him, and he became a captain over them, and there were with him about 400 men. I remember my mom and I talking about this, because she had brought it up in the situation. What's really interesting is David brings in all the unwanted people of society. They come to him. And he doesn't kick them out. He says, okay. Now here, in this point, notice how they're described. It's his family, people who are in distress, people in debt, and people who are discontented. That's how they're described. You know how they're described later?
Soldiers.
Mighty men of valor. This is his mighty men. There's a whole entire chapter devoted to the crazy things they do. There's an entire chapter devoted to the accolades of the mighty men of David. But at this point, they were just people nobody wanted. Ain't that like, it makes me think of 1 Corinthians chapter 1. Right? And God chooses the weak things of the world to confound the strong, and the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. I love it. He says, I'm not going to sit. David doesn't get the best warriors of the army. He gets all the people nobody wants.
The scraps.
Yep. And he says, okay, we're going to do this together. It's the same way God does with us. That's one of the things I love. I was talking about this the other day. Literally, my favorite thing is when I realize this is a really odd way to put it, but I realize just how worthless I am in terms of like, before God. Because the thing is, like, I don't have anything special, right? There's nothing special. And there are times where I really, really feel inadequate in certain things I do for the Lord. And it reminds me that it wasn't about me in the first place. So God said, every time there's a time where I feel weak, or where I feel undeserving, or I feel in a place where I'm not the person to be used, well, yeah. Because then in that case, God gets the glory for it, not me. Because there's nothing about me that I can then bring into it and say, oh, this was something special I did. I can only point to Christ because I wouldn't be able to do it on my own. So the beautiful thing is here with David, he's going to get these men. God blesses him with these men. Once again, I would say that this is all God's blessing on David. He's going to bless him with a bunch of people nobody else wants. And he's going to turn them into mighty men of valor because of how he works. Isn't that beautiful? Mm-hmm. God doesn't just want the best of the best. He wants everybody. He cares about these, if you will, the dredges of society just as much as he does the king. Praise God, ain't it? I tell you what, I like that. And so here with David could turn him away. Because that's the other thing I'll say too. David knows he's going to be king. He could turn him away and say, you're not up to my standard. After all, I'm the king's son-in-law. He could say, you're not special. Who do you think you are to come beg before me? He could have had any other reaction. And instead he says, all right, come on, let's go. We're going to go. Man after God's own heart. Just a few more things. I'm done. I've got 4 more verses. Go down with me down to verse 14. This is actually a really sad story. Saul finds out about what has happened with the priests, that they have fed David and the men that were with him. He only had a few with him at that time. Or maybe that was actually before. I don't think actually he had men with him. It's probably just him by himself. But he gets them in here. Saul comes and he finds out about the priests who have fed David. And so when he comes to him, he says, why, in verse 13, why have you conspired against me, thou and the son of Jesse, in that thou hast given him bread and a sword, and hast inquired of God for him, that he should rise against me to lie in wait at this day. So this is another thing that's interesting. I meant to mention this, I forgot about it. When he goes to the priest, he gets a shewbread. He also says, hey, do you have anything I can defend myself with? Like, is there any weaponry here? There is. There's one. You know what it was?
The sword they used for sacrifices?
Nope. It's Goliath's sword. He's a bigger man now. He's got a few years on him now. He's not a little boy anymore. So guess what? For the rest of his days, that's what he's wielding. He has old Goliath's sword. Isn't that interesting? Comes full circle. And so here we go. That it was at this temple. Why? What else was they going to do with it? What are they going to put it? So they put it there for safekeeping. And he says, this is all I got. And David says, okay. So he takes a sword. He gave him some food. So this is where Saul says, what have you done? You're conspiring. Excuse me. You're conspiring against me.
Zoom type.
We're good. All right. It says, then Ahimelech, that's the priest, and he answers the king. Notice what he says here. This is such a beautiful part of the reputation of David. He says, and who is so faithful among all thy servants as David, which is the king's son-in-law, and goeth at thy bidding, and is honorable in thine house? Did I then begin to inquire of God for him? He says, I honestly saw, he came here, he asked, why would I think he's against you? He's always been loyal to you. He's always cared about you. He's always been honorable in all that he does. Why would I even question God about whether he's here for a good reason or not? He's a good man. And he says, be it far from me. Let not the king impute anything unto his servant, nor to all the house of my father, for thy servant knew nothing of all this, less or more. He says, I only have ever known David to be good and honorable and care for you as a king. Why would I ever question the fact that he didn't do that? And then, of course, Saul says, thou shalt surely die, thou and all thy father's house. And this is interesting, just as a side note. Saul commands that they're killed, and his people won't do it. His servants won't do it. So he turns to this guy named Doeg. There's your name for a kid. Doeg, the Edomite. And this is the guy who came and told Saul about the whole situation in the first place. See, he'd been there when David came in and ate the shewbread and got the sword. And he ran straight back to Saul, told him about it. They came back, and he kills all of them. Can you imagine? I can't imagine what his fate was. But Doeg, the Edomite, slew 75 persons that did wear a linen ephod. That's 85 priests he murdered. You remember Saul? Do you remember Saul? Saul was the man who offered a sacrifice. He wanted to offer sacrifice to God so much he did it early. Saul was the man who thought, well, maybe if we keep some of these things, I can offer them to God, and then we could give him a special sacrifice with the victory he's given us. That was his thought process. That same man is now killing priests. The same one who was chosen. The same one who didn't want to be king. It's sad. It really is, to see where he falls to. And the reason I bring that up is to finish out the chapter here. One of his sons gets away. One of Ahimelech's sons gets away. His name's Ahitub. He's the son of Ahitub. He's Abiathar. He escapes and comes to David. And he tells David what's happened there in verse 21. It says, and David said unto Abiathar, I knew it that day. He's like, I knew it. I felt it. When Doeg the Edomite was there, that he would surely tell Saul, I have occasioned the death of all the persons in thy father's house. Abide with me, fear not, for he that seeketh my life seeketh thy life, but with me thou shalt be in safeguard. David says, he takes responsibility for something that really isn't even his fault. And then what he does is he says, don't worry, I'll keep you safe. You come with me, and I'll make sure you're safe. Because, of course, he'd take the one who escapes, and he'd protect. Because God's good like that. It's unfortunate that, Ahimelech and all of his family dies. And there's judgment that comes for that. There's no doubt about that. But David says, if there's anything I can do, I'll take care of you. I'll keep you safe. So when I think about David, if I can finish up this and kind of just round it out, I'll put that up under my notes. He has this constant this interaction with people, in that he is on a regular basis for most of his life showing mercy to people when he has no reason to do so. He's showing grace to people when he really doesn't have to. He's constantly taking in people who really he doesn't have to, nor should he even, because he's a royal at this point. He could look down on them. If you think back to, even like when we look in Jesus' day, when we look see about the parable about the rich man and Lazarus, he laid at the rich man's door. The rich man ignored him every day. Didn't even look at him. But David doesn't ignore people and the needs of the people, especially those that are small, and he's constantly finding a way to either take care or protect people while also then never taking the praise for himself. He gives it to God. And so when he's behaving himself wisely, it's because he's not building himself up, he turns it over to the Lord. He doesn't try to find a way to make himself bigger. It's always about how can I help God. And then he's also taking care of the people who need care the most without them being able to do anything for him. These are people who have nothing. They're discontented. They're in debt. They're in debt. They're distressed, which in distress carries with it the idea of being like in a place of, you would think of someone like the people you're talking about in Japan. They're in distress. They have no home. Right? They've had to run from, they have nothing. They have no money, have no food, no nothing. They're in distress. That's the same thing as to be in a place of emergency. People who are in debt, they don't have any money either because they're in debt. People who are discontent, the idea behind that, probably political discontent is most likely the intention behind it. But those are going to be people who clearly weren't in favor with the current system. So they probably also don't have anything. These people can't give back to him. Saul could. He takes care of them. He says, "You're my people. I'll take care of you because I'm going to be, I'm doing this because this is what will be right." So when he talks about God, David being a man after God's own heart, I really do genuinely believe it has to do with the mercy he shows, the love he's shown, and even towards Saul, the man who was the most undeserving person of love from David, period. He probably showed him the most love of all. Might we pray that we be that way, right? Especially myself, because boy howdy. I don't know. I'm not a big. I don't know how to feel about having javelins thrown at me. I haven't had it happen yet, but I can tell you that when I was in college, I had some barbs thrown at me of the verbal type, and I didn't like that. And I certainly didn't respond in it's okay, it's all good. So see, this is where David had learned something very early on. God's going to have to teach me, and that's all right. I've got a few years to learn it, I reckon. And I'll keep praying about it, and I'm praying that he keeps showing me a few things so I can be a little more like God. That's my prayer. So if we'll ask you, if you want to pray with me, we'll be dismissed from there. And I appreciate your good attention. I really do. I thank you for coming. I really do. I look forward to every time we get to be here. It's a great blessing to me. And I've been so thankful for the Bible studies and the sermons. And I'll tell you what, God, he's good. He really is. If maybe you've got something you want to come talk to the Lord about tonight. I don't know. We're talking about David, but maybe there's something weighing on your heart. Maybe you've got a Saul in your life you've been praying for, and you want to come and pray a little bit more for him. Well, that's what we're here for. Maybe you like me, and you got to pray that you get a little more David in you. If you'd like to join me, you're more than welcome. And if you'd like for me to pray with you, just let me know, and then we'll be dismissed from there.
Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Father. I do for your kindness, your love, and your mercy. I thank you, God, that you show that it is possible. It's possible to love with your love. It's possible to have your heart, even towards our enemies, Lord. It's tough. It really is. And God, I know I'm not a great example of it. So, Lord, I ask that you will. It'll be your words that are heard tonight, Lord, and not my example that's seen. And God, once again, I'm a growing man. I'm still working. You're still working on me. I really do think maybe that's a sign I ought to get. It says, "Don't judge me yet, Lord." It's like that old song. I'm still working. I'm still being worked on. And I just ask you to keep working on me. God, bring me closer to you. Show me your love. Help me to be able to show it to others. Can God help me to be loving and caring for those that maybe other people ignore or miss. God give us a chance to serve them, the ones who people might not think about. The not the in crowd, God, but those who need the help the most, probably. And God, I thank you. You're so good to us, Lord. You gave us salvation. You gave us your Son, Lord. And then not only that, you didn't just leave us alone. You keep helping us every day. So, Lord, just keep giving me a path and helps as we move towards it, Lord, to do a little bit better each day, just a little step. And God, we'll lift up your name and praise you for any progress that's made, any good that's done. We'll turn it over to you, God, and make sure that you get the glory, just as David did. Thank you. In your precious name we pray. Amen.
Well, I told you, by the time we'd be done, it'd stop raining, so. brought my umbrella for nothing. Looks like the sun might even be coming back out a little bit. I appreciate you a lot. Make sure Thursday night, 7 o'clock, we'll have Bible study. And if you get to come by, we'd love to see that. And then we'll be back on Sunday, obviously Sunday morning, Sunday night. And then Monday next week, we got a little work day if you get to come by at 6. Very good.
Prophet. You prophesied?
Yeah, I thought Elisha.
Oh, because of the rain? Yeah. No. I am it's actually one of my favorite things to talk about the difference in like what prophesying can mean. I am because the word preacher is similar. There's foretellers. That's the one you see in the Old Testament where they tell something to come. Yeah, no, I can't do any of that. I'm a forth-teller. I can tell you what is. I'm a great meteorologist. I can walk outside and say, it is not raining currently. And so biblically, that's the beauty of what I get to do in today's world. There's nothing new I can tell you, and I can't tell you anything to come, but I can tell you what God's done, and that's about all I got. So
Just stick with the rope.
that's exactly what. Yes, I'll stick with the rope that tells me if it's wet or if it's moving or if it's gone. I appreciate you all. Yes,
Got a question.
yeah.
Terry was wondering when they're gonna make the apple butter.
Well, should be good.
October.
Yeah, sometime in
In
October.
October.
Yeah, we've narrowed down the month to October. We will keep you updated on the week, and then when it gets closer, we'll update you on the exact day.
You've been,
I think that's our next meeting, isn't it?
well, it was in our last meeting, we started what we need to do right now.
Contact some apples, though, have hem some up before the owl get gone.
Correct, that was one of the things that we got a punch list. The first thing we asked about, what do we need to do, and comes we got something prepared. And this, actually, this work night coming up, we're gonna go through all the jars and the lids and stuff, get rid of that, and we're gonna thinking about 2 runs, and then calling on the apples, getting them tied up, getting that order.
We got close to 20 boxes of jars down below. And a lot of them we can use, but there's a few that's hidden within them, because Reese found an old orange juice jar, and the thing on it was like this narrow, had a neck on it like this.
You can't use them mayonnaise jars either.
No.
No, all that stuff we're gonna,
Yeah, 2
there's
thin.
way more than we need.
Yeah.
We're gonna separate and keep the good stuff, get rid of it all. It should have been done years ago.
In case there's more down at the fellowship hall.
There is.
Well, anyway, that's what we get to do Monday night. If you need anything at the fair this week, let me know. I'll see you then. At the fair. If you get to come to the fair, you can come see me. I'll be in my little booth. If you need anything, let me know.
Feel free to